Welcome to this video about functions. In this video, we are going to cover functions, explaining what they are and how they work. We will also have some examples and exercises using functions. A function is an encapsulated block of code that performs a specific task. In programming, we give a name to each function, so these blocks of code are represented by names. Usually, we include in a function code that is going to be repeated in our program, so we don't have to repeat it every time we want to use it. Instead of repeating the whole block of code, we can just use the name of the function whenever we need that block of code, and it will work as if the whole block of code is there. We call this calling a function. You can call a function wherever you need it. I know this sounds a bit strange right now if you have never seen functions before, but let's try to put it in simple terms. Imagine you have a box where you can introduce a paper with a number written on it, and it will print out a paper saying if the number is even or odd as true or false. So for example, if the number is even, we can get true, and if it is odd, we can get a false. Now, imagine you have a different box that can receive a paper with two numbers written on it, and will print out the result of adding the two numbers. So our box gets the two numbers, adds them internally, and tells us the result. In this example, I have 3 plus 4 equals 7. We can also name our two boxes to identify what each box does. So if we want to know if a number is even, we can put it into the is number even box. And if we want to add two numbers, we can put them into the add numbers box. This is, at a very basic level, how functions work. Each different box represents a function. A function can receive a list of parameters. In the box case, the parameters were written in a piece of paper and introduced into the box. A function works similarly. Then we have the body of the function. This is the block of code that will get executed every time the function is called. Once the block of code finishes executing, it will typically return something as a result of the function. In the box example, the first box tells us if the number is even or not, and the second box returns the result of adding the two numbers it receives. Let's see how the is number even box will look as a function. First, we are using the word function to say that this is a function, followed by the name we want to give the function. Function names can't have spaces, so we are keeping the same name without spaces. Then, we have between parentheses the list of parameters this function receives, which in this case is a number. We can name these parameters however we like, and we can use these parameters inside the function body later. Then, inside the body of the function, we are checking if the number is even or odd by checking if number modulus 2 is equal to 0. If it is equal to 0, then we know the number is even, else the number is odd. You can see I'm using the word return to say what this function is going to return. We are returning true if the number is even, since the function is called isNumberEven, and false when it is not. You can see more information about the modulus operator in a previous video of this course if you have any doubts about how to use it. Now let's do the same for the add numbers box. Here we have again the word function to indicate this is a function, and then the name of the function, in this case add numbers. Then we put between parentheses the list of parameters this function receives. Add numbers will receive the two numbers we want to add, and I have decided to call them number 1 and number 2. I am creating a new variable called sum, where I will store the result of adding number 1 and number 2. Then, I am returning sum as the output of the function. As I explained in the beginning of this video, we can use the name of a function whenever we need its functionality. It would work as if the whole block of code inside the function is in the place where we have called it. To call a function, we use the function name followed by the parameters between parentheses. We have to write these parameters in the same order than they appear when we created the function. When calling the function, we will include values for all the parameters in order. So value for par 1 will be stored in the first parameter, value for par 2 in the second, and value for par 3 in the third. Now let's see how we can use a function in our code. We are going to take the add numbers function and use it to print the result of adding two numbers. First, we create a variable in our code called result and assign the output of add numbers to it. We do this by calling the function. To call the function and execute the code inside, we need to use its name. and then include between parentheses the list of parameters we want to pass to the function. As add numbers receives two numbers as parameters, we are passing here 2 and 3. The order in the parameters when calling the function must match the order in the parameters that we defined when we wrote the function. The first number will be stored in number 1 in our function, and the second number will be stored in number 2. After calling the function, we can print the result. Notice that when assigning the result of a function call to a variable, what we are really assigning is whatever is returned in the function. However, you can also create functions without a return in them, so these functions will return nothing. For example, we can create a function to print the message we pass to it. Here, I have created a function that will print "we have a message," followed by the message that is passed as parameter to the function. After creating the function, I am calling it using its name and including as parameter "hi there." This will cause the function to print out "we have a message, hi there." Now let's do some exercises. For the first exercise, we are going to write a function that will receive two numbers and return the subtraction of the first number minus the second number. You can stop the video here and I will show you the solution next. First, we write the word function and give this function a name. I am calling it subtract numbers. Then, between parentheses, we need the enter parameters for this function. We said that we wanted to subtract two numbers, so we have number 1 and number 2 as parameters. Inside the function, I'm creating a new variable that will store the result of number 1 minus number 2. Finally, I am returning the result. In this second exercise, we are going to practice calling this function to subtract 9 minus 2 and store the result in a new variable. You can stop the video here before I show the solution. And this is how we can call this function. First, I am creating a new variable to store the output of the function, and then I am calling it using its name and including between parentheses the two numbers I want to subtract. This line of code would store the number 7 in the variable subtraction, since that would be the output from the function. For the third exercise, I want you to write a function that receives two numbers and returns the bigger one. If the two numbers are equal, just return the number. You can stop the video here to write your solution. Okay, so here we have the solution. I have called this function bigger number, but you can call it however you want. A good name will tell you what the function does in a clear way. This function receives two numbers, which I am calling A and B instead of number 1 and number 2, like in previous cases. You can also choose your own parameter names, but be sure to be using those names inside the function. In the function body here, first I am checking if A is bigger than or equal to B. If it is bigger than B, then we have to return A, but we said that if the numbers are equal, we just return whatever number it is, which will also be covered here by the equal in the comparison. Lastly, in the else, we return B, since this function will only hit the else clause if B is bigger than A. If this sounds confusing, you can find more information about comparisons and if statements in the third video of this course. To visualize it better, imagine we call this function with the parameters 3 and 9. Knowing that this function returns the bigger number, we should get 9 as result. What I have written in the right is what the function would actually look like with these parameters. As 3 is not bigger than or equal to 9, we return 9. And we can see how the else section will only get executed if B is bigger than A. This is the final video for my Introduction to Programming course. I hope this course has helped you learn the basics of programming. Let me know if this was useful in any way. I may keep doing videos with more complex topics, like data structures or analysis of algorithms, if these videos actually help people. As always, feel free to ask questions in the comments, and you can only learn how to program by programming. So now that you know the basics, you should start programming in your chosen language.